be speaking I'll be speaking very, very quickly about how ethnic minority communities and groups are affected by climate change. But before I do that, I'll speak very briefly about who I am and why I'm here and why am I even relevant to this conversation. The Ethnic Minority Environmental Network itself is one that creates connections between ethnic minority groups and individuals and mainstream organizations in addressing climate change and climate justice related issues in Scotland. We do that through a lot of our partnerships, collaborations that help us promote local and national actions. In terms of partnerships, that is what I'll be drawing on, one of our main partnerships to have this discussion. We've been very lucky this year to have collaborated and partnered with Race Equality Foundation and New Philanthropy Capital, where we've been able to collect lots of research and data around how ethnic minority communities are being affected by climate change in Scotland and across the UK. During the research process, we've all conducted around 21 to 22 sessions of deliberation groups and workshops across the UK and within Scotland, and followed by lots of online sessions and research and data collection, as you can imagine. So I'll be drawing on that research to have this discussion, and I'll be sharing that piece of research with you after this session as well, so you can have a look at it yourselves. One of the main elements of that research was embedding the term environmental racism, and it's something that I'm using every day to explain a lot of the work that EMEN does. We all know from previous discussions, I'm sure you're also aware that ethnic minority communities and all marginalized communities are affected by the environmental crisis, mainly because of societal and social inequity and inequalities that a lot of you, I'm sure, are working on. So in one way or the other, you're all helping us progress on climate change in some way or the other. The systemic racism that people from ethnic minority communities face, where they're disproportionately burdened by the impacts of climate change, is what we call environmental racism. And I'll be touching a bit more on that in the following slides. So I think one of the most interesting parts of the whole research itself and reading the whole research in final was just this one line that said that we know from evidence that ethnic minority people will be no greater affected by climate change than their white peers if the results of historic inequity were stripped away. And I think that really does sum up all of the social inequity and the disproportionate burden that we talk about when we talk about environmental racism. So to discuss the whole research will be very difficult for me to do, unlike how Cornell has been able to so beautifully summarize everything. I don't think I'll be capable of that. So I think what I've done is just talk about two of the biggest risks that we were able to discuss in the research briefing. The first one being air pollution, which is I'm sure not a new phenomenon to any one of you over here, but I think the research findings really do sum up very, very well how disproportionately people from ethnic minority communities might be affected. Some of the health issues that specifically affect ethnic minority people disproportionately include asthma. We know from evidence now that ethnic minority communities are 36% more likely to be affected by asthma than their white counterparts. And we know that air pollution is one of the more important triggers for that. We know that long-term exposure to air pollution has been associated with cardiovascular diseases. And we don't have enough evidence to point to one reason, but we know that cardiovascular disease is something that's a lot higher amongst Black and South Asian groups. And again, air pollution is one of the bigger triggers behind it. We know that long-term exposure to air pollution has also been associated with diabetes. In the UK in general, type 2 diabetes is disproportionately prevalent among people from South Asia, and all outcomes are known to be poor. We know that African Caribbean people are 3 to 5 times more likely than any other group to be diagnosed and hospitalized for schizophrenia. And air pollution, again, we found many strong links to schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders. And high exposure to air pollution increases the risk to low birth weight, preterm birth, and stillbirth, and especially for those people living in busy roads and in most vulnerable areas. We also know that increased temperatures have also been linked to pre-birth and lower birth weights. And we also know that traveler and gypsy communities living in caravans are at risk of harm from floods, heat waves, and air pollution, as caravans are not adapted to climate change, and usually caravan sites are not in the best of places. And all of these facts are very relevant, not just for ethnic minority people, but also for all marginalized people who tend to live in urban areas, in urban vulnerable areas and deprived areas in poverty. The second issue I wanted to discuss was our biggest risk being our declining natural environment. It's very important to discuss that as we're sitting in Scotland. One of the things that we have got to be so proud of is our nature, but we know that our nature crisis is at its height right now. Biodiversity loss in general, we know, is rooted in human behaviors that harm species and the ecosystems that live in. And because of biodiversity loss, the three main risks that I thought should be shared with people more widely being food security and quality. We know that our food security and quality is reducing every single day, especially in Scotland. We have a plethora of evidence to prove this, due to our intensive farming practices, industrial practices, and people from ethnic minority communities who live on lower incomes are particularly more vulnerable to higher costs for foods in low nutritional value and high toxicity exposure. Access to green space is, I'm sure, something that a lot of you have also talked about if you've not talked about it in this terminology. But I think we all care about going out and taking care of our mental health, getting some good air in, going and taking our kids out to a park. But we know from evidence as well that ethnic minority communities, due to a combination of issues of poor quality or quantity of green spaces near homes and national parks, and barriers such as practical, financial, cultural, and exacerbated experiences of racism, do not access green spaces. This in general has such a massive impact on just the quality of life for most people, but even more so for people from marginalized communities and ethnic minority communities. This also means that people from ethnic minority communities are missing out on a myriad of mental and physical health benefits. The third, and again a very important one, is that the health risks due to localized pollution. I think Cornell touched on it as well. People living in poorer areas usually tend to be in areas that are closer to waste management sites, including incinerators or landfills, which have long been suspected to be related to many, many health issues. And people from ethnic minority communities are more likely to be living in those areas. Now, all of this research is not supposed to just say that ethnic minority communities are the only ones affected by all of these issues. We know that everyone is affected by climate change, but there are certain communities that are one step behind, and there are certain communities that might be adversely affected because of systemic and structural issues. And it is the responsibility of all of us working not just in environmental charities, but all of you working on the myriad of social issues to be helping curb any of these issues. All in all, we know that ethnic minority communities are also underrepresented in mainstream organizations campaigning on climate change. We know that our green sector, all the organizations working in environment and conservation professions, we know that these professions are the least diverse in the UK after farming. And we know that there are still gaps in our research and other researches conducted in this area in understanding policy, especially around climate adaptation and restoring nature. But it is our job to keep doing these researches, and it's the job of the government to keep funding researches like this, so we know exactly where the gaps in our society are and how we can fix them. So I think that should be all from me. Thank you.